few weeks ago, I received an email from East Asia Soft, a company who brings a lot of Eastern video game titles to English-speaking audiences, and was excited to see that my request for the review copy of Tokyo Clanpool was accepted. Honestly, don't know anything about the game, but a few months prior to this, I was browsing their website and saw this upcoming dungeon crawler game that had what I'd consider to be fairly solid-looking art. I'm kind of a thick line fan, personally. I'm currently in the middle of my dungeon crawler life arc, and so I threw in a request just to see what would happen. I ended up getting a copy of the game in advance, and I immediately set out to see how much I could play before the embargo released. Before we continue, if you like this content, subscribe to Yokoso Otaku, and remember to hit the thumbs up button to help us out and let us know your thoughts. A few days passed, and honestly, I was really enjoying myself with the game. As I usually do, I decided to poke around online and see what people thought, only to see the majority of people online talking about how it's now banned on Steam. I needed to know why, and that's when things started to get weird. The more I read, the more I saw people were claiming the game had lowly content, and it was the core reason why the game was banned. At the time, I had about 11 hours into the game and was late into Chapter 3. I'd been trying to run the game as complete as possible up until that point by using different weapons, skills, outfits, exploring each map to 100%, and completing all of the side objectives. The game starts out really limited in what you can do, and by the 11th hour I felt like I had pretty much unlocked all of the core mechanics and areas to explore at that part of the game. The game takes place in Tokyo, go figure, and centers around a group known as the Diet Dolls, who are basically girls with special powers, the leader of which is given the title the Prime Minister of Japan. Outside of one of the characters, I'd say the design of these girls is fairly standard for anime. I do have to point out, though, that one of these girls is 100% without a doubt in my mind made to look underage and has the personality and traits of a small minor. The story of the game is that these girls are leading the country and protecting the citizens against monster attacks using their special skills and special tools. A giant tower shows up, and the girls set out on an adventure to explore this tower labyrinth and hopefully stop the monster invasion. Of course, as you play, more characters are introduced, and there's some twists and turns to the story which keeps this quest interesting. During the first 11 hours, there's a fair amount of conversations that characters have with each other and other characters. I'd say roughly 95% of the dialogue is completely harmless and standard fare, with the main party asking their staff questions about what's happening and reporting their findings in the labyrinth as the story develops. The other 5% is what I consider light innuendo, and it's often randomly shoehorned into the back end of conversations. There's some bantering the girls have about their looks at times, and some quick one-liners, but the only things I really felt were out of place, or even stuck out to me, was that the nurse has a trope quality about her where she makes lame excuses to inappropriately grab the females as part of her work. And the game has a slightly strange, unnecessary mechanic where the process of leveling the girls comes up as heavy innuendo. So the way the nurse acts is what many would consider to be highly problematic trope in anime that a lot of Western audiences want to see gone. It's very old, and it's normally done as an old man with the intention of being lighthearted and comedic. I see it as a very tiny part of the game that is never really dug far into, though. The nurse's appearance is super rare in that manner, so it really didn't bother me deeply, nor did I find it a takeaway from the game, as it was easily ignorable to me. The innuendo mechanic of leveling up was odd and really based on everything up until that. The scene felt really out of place. They explain at one point that the enemies you defeat give off a type of energy, and you have special suits which allow you to capture it and be strengthened by it. That is all fine itself, however, this explanation was accompanied by a scene where the girls are absorbing energy, and while doing so, making sounds that I think wouldn't be unreasonably described as sexual. To strengthen that, each of the girls explains how it makes them feel, revealing each has a different experience. They all blush, and a discussion is had which really furthers the innuendo beyond what you see prior to that moment. Additionally, other things people might find sus are the outfits. The game has a mechanic where you assign party members a class by equipping them with a specific digi suit. This suit change affects how the character portrait is shown on the screen, and as you can guess, a game called out for its fan service does indeed have some outfits that are revealing, most specifically the bathing suits, which are naturally very revealing. I will say I attempted to see each of the characters in different outfits to see how appropriate I felt they were, and honestly, outside of the bikini, I saw no issues with the different suit options on each character. I did notice that it seems the outfits appear to be a little different depending on who is wearing it. This was most obvious with the small-framed younger looking character in particular, who had the clothing options appear much less revealing than the larger, fuller framed members, except for the bathing suit, but I still don't see a major issue with this. As I continued to follow discussions online about the reasons people believe the game was banned on Steam, I found it increasingly difficult to find those issues in my playthrough. The most shocking of which was a claim I found to be more and more spread that the game was confirmed to have verified CP content via a minigame, which sees the player grabbing and touching the girls in a sexual manner. It was honestly at this point I started to proverbially crap my pants, as they say. I've not been one to necessarily shy away from ecchi content on this channel. It's not a main focus, but it also hasn't been anything I've really generally had a lot of issues with. But this claim really made me concerned as someone who's working on a review of the game and by extension would be promoting this on my channel. The problem with this though was I couldn't find anyone willing to tell me exactly where the mechanic was in the game, and I wasn't seeing any of this myself. The game was originally released in 2017 on the PSP exclusive to Japan, and it's possible that the review copy I have is censored. Editor Dre here. While I was late into writing this review, I went back to review specific elements to the game, and through the tutorial section I actually found out what was being referenced by people claiming this game has CP content. There's a function in the game called Stigmata, the department of which is run by the nurse I mentioned earlier, that almost seems out of place. In this department, you can manage special skills each party member has, and according to the tutorial, the player must find these skills hidden on the physical bodies of the party members. It mentions a minigame type activity where you see the party members and poke and prod at her body to find hotspots and reveal the skill. Finding this out confirmed that this game, or at least my review copy, is censored and has redacted that feature because all I could do with this feature is choose Stigmata available from a menu system. Honestly, while I'm not a huge fan of the censorship, I think that this is actually a really good thing, as most of the perverted stuff in this game feels unnecessary and adds little to the actual enjoyment of the game. It's possible you clicked this video just to find out that information, but the rest of the video contains the rest of the features in this game, and I would greatly appreciate if you continue to watch because I really enjoy this game, and I think it has a lot to offer dungeon crawler fans. As far as my desire for a dungeon crawler goes, this game has probably been my most favorite mechanically that I've played in a very long time, and it appears to do a lot of things right to keep my interest and be a fun experience with some light challenges and reasonable pacing. What I like most about the mechanics is that they start you off very basic and limited, which allows you to feel a good sense of progress as you play and unlock more and more features and abilities in the game to build your team and progress in the labyrinth. The first example of this is the ability to break through cracked walls. Initially, you have a small part of the labyrinth to explore, and while you do so, you notice many different walls that appear to be interactable in some way. Since you don't have the ability to interact with them, you must forge ahead and explore the area in a very limited capacity up to a certain point. You will then have a little story play out, and the ability to break down these walls becomes available. Then you're placed back in the same area, but you get to re-experience it with this new ability that expands your exploration and feels like it refreshes the area by giving you something new to utilize in that same space. As the game progresses, there are more and more traps and dungeon features that block you from exploring, and you will later continue to gain more abilities to maneuver through them. The way that this unravels really gives you a strong sense of continuous achievement and made me really interested in continuing to explore even prior areas just to see what more I could do or what I might have missed. An interesting feature the game also has is a support percentage, which you will see listed on the screen as you explore the dungeon. The game explains by stating the party exploring the dungeon is being recorded and broadcast live for the citizens of Tokyo to watch and enjoy. While you explore, positive actions like defeating strong foes or finding great items will increase the support percentage, and negative actions such as falling into dungeon traps, which will reduce the percentage. While you explore, positive actions like defeating strong foes or finding great items will increase the support percentage, and negative actions such as falling into dungeon traps will reduce the percentage. The higher the percentage you have, the more money you'll earn, and at certain higher percentage levels, you'll see bonuses like reduced skill costs, which help you out massively in battle. Combat is always a big part of these type of games, and speaking of difficulty levels, you start the game without a choice and are required to play for quite a few hours. Battles are randomly generated, and for the most part, there are very few instances where you know a battle is coming ahead of time. Boss fights are always marked very clearly with an icon, and later in the game you will encounter extra tough enemies that show up as moving markers on the map. 99% of your fights will just happen as you're moving through the labyrinth, and one thing I think everyone will agree on is that there are a lot of random battles. Sometimes it feels like they happen every other step. On the plus side though, the game has some really great features to auto-fight and to speed up combat to lightning fast speeds, which really greatly lessens the frustration of having so many battles. The battles also don't feel entirely without purpose because you not only get XP to level up your characters, but also gain XP that levels your Gadgeta. It seems as though while you're fighting constantly, you're also leveling, becoming stronger, and you pick up a ton of various items and equipment. Speaking of equipment, there's not only a semi-diverse set of items that you get to boost your party, but the equipment comes with rarity levels. This made it kind of fun because while you might pick up an awesome helmet at the beginning of the next layer of the labyrinth, you can still be surprised happily later when you pick up the same helmet again, but it's a higher rarity and has much better stats. As far as what you can equip on each character, you have slots for up to 2 weapons, a headpiece, a chest piece, and boots. These slots are for stat boosting in particular, and the weapons come in various options such as swords, axes, guns, whips, wands, and ranged weapons like bows. There's no restriction as to who can use what weapon, but you want to see which stats are boosted and what skills you gain from them so they are in line with your character class. Classes are set based on what type of digisuit is equipped. Digisuits are the things I was talking about earlier that absorb the enemy's energy after defeating them, and the type of suit the character has on them determines their class. They have fairly obvious names for the suits, but also the description text helps with identifying what class the character is. You start off with one suit type for each character, but as you play more, you have opportunities to unlock more, and if you go to the main menu before starting the game, you can actually toggle more suits that were likely DLC options for the PSP release. Another major factor in your character strength is a function called Gadgeta, which I'm sure I'm likely not saying correct at all. These come in form of women, the reason which is actually explained later in the game during a mini event that you can unlock. I can't say I fully understand all the systems as they work, but with my limited understanding, I can say that they come in various elements and provide major stat boosts to the characters they are equipped to. They can be upgraded in various ways. One is through leveling in fights, one is to use items on them in your base which increase their ranks, and the third is through fusion. As far as fighting, it's as simple as being able to equip a party member and they gain XP and level up the same way characters do. At your base, you can use items which come from drops and chests in the labyrinth. These items need to be identified at the base store, and then they level up the rank of that Gadgeta between 1 and 5 at a time. Rank is important because having Gadgeta at higher ranks unlocks their ability to be evolved into more powerful versions beyond just combining different Gadgeta in basic fusion. Fusion isn't a system I fully mastered, but it is as you'd think and allows you to take 2 Gadgeta and make them into a single more powerful being. Different elements can be combined, and the game offers you a chart that explains what mixtures make what. The game tells you outright you should detach the same element of Gadgeta as the party member aligns with to maximize their benefit. You'll see a percentage listed when you're equipping them, which I think is effectiveness rating for that alignment during Sacred Union, which I will cover momentarily. Jumping into the combat side of things again, you have the following choices: attacks, Digimagic, apps, Precious, Sacred Union, and Weight. Attacks are your basic attacks and come from what Gadgeta you have equipped as well as what weapon you have equipped. You get a list of available attacks and can make a set order for how they will be cast during that character's attack turn. They use EP, which is basically what most games called SP or magic. This EP grows during combat, allowing you to chain techniques together. The game is pretty centric around elements, and thankfully there's a box on the screen that will let you know what attacks are strong against enemies or what they resist. Digimagic is your magic skills. I don't know if this really needs expanded discussion. If you played a game, you've most likely seen or used magic. Apps are special skills that are on your character's phone. They use battery, which is a separate energy system in the game I've yet to talk about. Most apps in the first 14 hours of gameplay are used in dungeon exploration, but the healing app is unlocked really early and comes in super clutch for quick healing of a single character during battles. Precious or items, it's just a fancy name for using items, and there's a number of battle items, but in normal and easy difficulties I can't say I've used them much from what I've played. There's items to heal, to use elemental magics, and to mess with enemy turns. I did find that the game does get quite a bit more challenging later on though, and Precious are actually pretty important, so definitely don't get rid of them during gameplay. early on. Sacred Union is something I briefly mentioned before, and it's a pretty interesting mechanic for tougher battles. I typically only use the feature during boss fights or on some of the rare strong enemies that you encounter later. The skill has you choose how many of your Gadgeta you want to combine in order to gain stat boosts, damage boosts, and extra EP. The more you choose, the more of a bonus you get, but you'll see percentages next to the choices, and this is basically your chance of a successful union. The more Gadgeta you choose, the more boosts you gain, but the less chances you have at being successful. It's a huge gamble because if you succeed, you gain incredible power and extra EP to increase how many attacks you do per turn, but failure is catastrophic, as it means you can no longer use that Gadgeta's effects or skills for the entire remainder of battle, which is wildly crippling, especially long ones against powerful enemies. There's a bit more to this system and ways to manipulate the percentages, but as I'm describing so many mechanics in this game, I'm just going to leave this one at that. Wait is the last option you have, and honestly it's self-explanatory. You just skip that character's turn. So after you've explored as much of the labyrinth as you can, and after all your battles, you'll eventually end up returning to base. Returning to base means you either find an exit point, you use a return key item, which are wildly common, or you can use app skills to return if you have the battery power. You don't just go back to base though. You'll go through a process known as cabinet elections. This is a strange system I don't totally get, but it'll go through a voting process where your party will be judged on various traits such as damage done or support provided, and as the votes tally up, a winner will be chosen for that run. The winner chosen is the MVP and generally receives a nice bonus to their XP gained and sometimes a little stat boost. After that, then you go back to base. At your base, you have various sections to make. It's basically a series of departments, all with a specific purpose. Unlocking them all took quite a bit, and I believe it was around the 11-hour mark for me when I had everything opened up. The full facility list is as follows: Move Out, App Dev Center, Precious Study, Data Room, Gadgeta Department, Stigmata Lab, and Diet. Move Out is basically just the option to head into the dungeon. You can also just press B to do the same thing. The App Dev Center is where you get new phone apps or upgrade existing ones, both of which just involve you having the right amount of money. This area is helpful, but you really only visit it once per labyrinth section, as there's only a few to buy and a few to upgrade, and until then you have to wait to get more developed. Precious Study is essentially an item shop. You can take the precious items you find and identify them, which is kind of random and is the way I acquire all my items to rank up my Gadgeta. You can also buy, sell, and create items here. The data room is basically an area where you start unlocking quests. You don't need to accept them to work on them, and it's good as you explore just to pop in and see if you have any completed, which will net you rare items for the completion. The Gadgeta department is where you fuse, create, and rank up your Gadgeta. I mentioned this mechanic earlier, so I won't go into it again. The Stigmata Lab was also previously talked about earlier. This feature is likely censored in my copy, and honestly, hopefully in all the copies, as I don't think it's necessary to have that function in the game, and it's better left as a series of menus to choose skills from, even though it doesn't entirely make sense. Finally, you have the Diet. This is maybe my favorite feature in a way, as it's a big list of things you might want for either enjoyment or to increase your battle proficiency. You can ask a jury for these bonuses, and you'll see different sections of the jury and their support for your request. There's a section to persuade them, which involves you using specific items you find in the dungeon to increase their support. The different items each affect their support differently, as each group likes specific things, and I found it kind of fun to figure out which works best and what doesn't for each group. While this allows you to get cool stuff like powerful equipment, items, or new apps, you also have the option later to request learning secrets about each of your base members. Getting this approved allows you to view a little VN scene that shows some behind the scenes info about the character and fun events. Earlier I mentioned finding out why the Gadgeta are all girls, and it's in this feature. That's how I learned to do that. With that, I think I basically covered most of what you need to know about this game. As I mentioned, there's a ton of chatter online about this game being gross lowly trash, and while the original PSP release likely had some fan service features that the West doesn't receive well, I didn't have any issues with what was presented and what I played in this copy. Honestly, as I said before, this is probably the most fun and enjoyment I've had with a dungeon crawler in a long time. The pacing and unlock system works really well, and the labyrinth gets more and more complicated and interesting as you continue. The characters and stories are okay, but I don't consider that to be a highlight. It's a great game, and I'll stand by that. I hope you check out my streams if you have any questions, and feel free to let me know your thoughts below. You can get the game on GOG. I have a link in the comments. You can also buy it on Play Asia physically for the Nintendo Switch. If you want to go that route, I have an affiliate link below. It will cost you no more money to use that link, but it will help me out, and I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, if you like this content, hit the thumbs up. If you don't, hit the thumbs down, and subscribe to Yokoso Otaku for more anime news, reviews, gaming, and more.